there, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's Friday, a little after 2 o'clock. We had some technical difficulties, but thank you for tuning in. It is time for Coalition Conversations. Joining me today, we have CPA's Jeff Ferry and our industry analysis, Ken Rapoza. These two
busy man
good dynamic together. So we're in for a really good show today. We're going to be talking about the year in trade during 2020. Jeff, CPA and the research team just put out an article yesterday with your reviews and analysis of what took place in the world of trade during 2020. There were some ups and downs, but overall, you want to go ahead and explain a little bit on how this is going to impact the economy and what we do with the GDP and our exports and surplus?
Sure, Melissa. So what we saw last year was the trade deficit continues to get worse. It was 17% worse in 2020 as compared to 2019, $678 billion. That's our deficit on goods and services. And even worse than that was our deficit on merchandise trade, which hit an all-time high of $916 billion. So that's the highest ever goods trade deficit in U.S. history and in world history. For all recorded data we have, no other nations ever run a deficit on that kind of scale. And people sometimes say, well, why does that matter? That's not an important economic variable. And we strongly disagree. It's a very important economic variable. What it represents is roughly 3% of U.S. economic demand going to foreign goods, going to imports, when it should be going to domestic production. And of course, within the manufacturing sector, it's a much more severe problem because our calculations from our reshoring index show about 22% of manufacturing demand goes to imports, and no country can build its manufacturing sector with a fifth of the demand going to imports. And as I said, the problem in 2020 just got worse as compared to 2019. I don't hold out. I have little reason to believe it would get better this year in 2021. So it's not a good picture.
Ken, what do you take on this? Looking at it from an industry perspective and kind of bringing it down to terms of how it affects, the common person. What is your thoughts?
Okay. Well, I think as Jeff said, if anytime you're importing more, it means you're making less here in the United States. But there's one good thing to remember, and I've been piling through a lot of this data over the last week, is a lot of the stuff that we do make stays here, right? So even though our exports don't look as beautiful as our imports do, obviously, it's because a lot of the stuff that we make here stays here and is consumed here still. So, me and Jeff were talking about this earlier today. Manufacturing in the United States has made a comeback. The United States is still a massive consumer society, which cannot be forgotten. And we just import so much because a lot of the stuff, either we don't make here or we need it to make other things here. So I think the takeaway from a lot of the stuff is that certain industries are becoming commodified, like certain simple electronics are becoming commodified. The automotive industry is still becoming heavily weighted more towards Mexico. But again, we produce a lot of the cars here and we sell them here. We're not necessarily importing them. So it all depends on the sectors. And I'd like to ask Jeff, how did these numbers really come down realistically? Because we have a situation where we're still producing a lot of stuff here, like semiconductors. We're still producing most of the stuff here. We're still a dominant force in semiconductors worldwide, but yet we import obviously more than we export. But most of the stuff we make stays here, so these are things to consider as well. And I think it's important to understand that part of the equation. I'll let Jeff take it from here because he understands more. He can even help me understand, how that works, because the trade deficit is getting huge, but we have to understand as well that a lot of stuff that we make is staying here. We're not a huge exporting nation like China, for example, or Vietnam. And Vietnam's trade deficit with the United States is huge because we don't really sell a lot of stuff to Vietnam, right? What do they buy from us? Almost nothing. So, and China, as Jeff put out on the report today, has basically offshored a lot of its lower end manufacturing to Vietnam, and Vietnam is essentially now an offshore paradise for Chinese multinationals and manufacturing in general, right? So that's what we're seeing in that particular country. So, Jeff?
You with us, Jeff?
I can hear you. I can't hear Ken.
Oh, so sorry. So Ken's wondering, with the deficit with, the trade imports and the exports, and our deficit decreasing with China, but increasing with Vietnam, what are we supposed to do to make things better realistically?
Yep, that's a good question. So, first of all, I'd say that it's good that we've cut our dependence on China and that we continue, hopefully, to reduce our imports from China. But the problem is that when you put a hefty tariff on Chinese goods, Chinese companies and other companies immediately find other places to ship their product out of. And Vietnam's been kind of the destination of choice. So we've seen skyrocketing level of imports from Vietnam. So we could put a tariff on Vietnam. We could, right now, the USTR is exploring whether or not the Vietnamese currency is undervalued. We believe it is undervalued by something on the order of 15%. So a 15% tariff would be completely justified on Vietnamese imports, and that would definitely have an impact on reducing imports from Vietnam. So those are some of the things that the Biden administration's got to be looking at right now. And it's obviously important. We need to get manufacturing imports under control. So that would help. The fundamental problem, of course, is that if you levy a tariff on Vietnam or any other country, immediately producers in Asia start to look for yet another place where they can claim their imports are coming from, and set up production pretty quickly and start shipping to the US. We're the world's largest consumer market and pretty much the only ones who believe in, quotes, free trade. In other words, please come and ship into our market and we won't hurt you. So we're the target for all these countries. So what we really need is a comprehensive solution. And we've often talked about making the dollar more competitive as the ideal comprehensive solution, because that affects us against every other country. So that's really the broadest and the best policy choice to act on the value of the US dollar, which is some 26% overvalued.
So for those who are watching with us, feel free to go ahead and put a question or a comment and we can go ahead and stream them. This one question did just come in, Jeff. And it's, why is currency misalignment the larger problem for U.S. producers? So somebody must have went in and read your report. And you did speak about the, currency just being overvalued by 27% on the dollar. But, why is this misalignment that bigger problem?
Yeah, okay. So a lot of people remember the disputes we had years ago with Japan about currency manipulation and then with China. And they're familiar with the idea of currency manipulation, which is a government deliberately acting to hold down the value of its currency. Well, since about 2014, China has stopped manipulating its currency aggressively. When the Trump tariffs first came on, they definitely managed their currency, and I would call that manipulation, from 6.3 to around the 7 range. It's now fallen back to around 6.5. But that's actually not very much manipulation compared to the years between 2000 and 2010, when it was some 30 to 40% undervalued. So that problem has kind of shrunk in size. But currency misalignment is a different problem. It is a problem caused by the huge financial markets' demand for dollar-based assets. Every month, there's some $3 trillion of inflows of foreign currencies into dollar-based assets, by which I mean stocks and bonds, and that holds the dollar artificially above its competitive level. So that's the problem we have to act on more than manipulation. The misalignment problem is a fundamental systemic problem in the international currency system, where the dollar is in demand. It's sometimes called the dominant currency in the world, and it's in demand so much that it's grossly overvalued. The manipulation problem, not only is it a smaller problem, but it's also a sort of legalistic issue where you've got to people keep setting standards of so-called proof to prove a country is manipulating its currency. And as you may know, the Treasury recently said Vietnam and Switzerland meet the current congressional standards. It's not yet taking any action. Those are two relatively small countries. What I'd like to see is a systemic solution called the market access charge, which would bring down the dollar, address misalignment directly, say, look, nobody's doing anything wrong. The financial markets just are too much in love with the dollar. We want to put a tax on foreigners' ability to buy dollars so we can get the dollar down to a competitive level so our manufacturers can compete on a level playing field with foreign manufacturers.
Gotcha. We've got somebody else who is asking about the prescription meds being imported. So what do we do about that to help curb that offset and that imbalance?
Yeah, I think that is a big problem. We need to do something about that. We can't rely on foreign imports. The pandemic makes it crystal clear. We still have a lot of meds, both prescription and non-prescription, by the way. Even simple things like aspirin are coming in, are dependent on, often on Chinese pharmaceutical ingredients. So there's a lot of dependence on China wrapped up in this medication issue. So what we need to do is we need to use the Defense Production Act to encourage pharmaceutical companies, or incentivize, and you could even say compel pharmaceutical companies to produce here in the United States. And we need to also incentivize them through tax breaks and other measures. And there are some reports that the Biden administration is looking into these things. So I'm hopeful they actually, seize the opportunity, while people are still very much aware of the pandemic and the shortages we've had of medicines. It's incredible. I think, the FDA has something like 180 medicines are listed as being in shortage. And basically, I think they give the pharmaceutical companies far too easy a ride. You've got drugs in shortage. You've got drugs that come from countries known for substandard production. We need the Congress and the FDA to get tough on this issue and incentivize, through a mixture of taxes and use of DPA, more investment in production facilities in this country. Ken may have something to add to this.
No, I don't really have much to add to that, Jeff, other than I think there's a hearing.
He's there and he's speaking.
Yeah, Jeff, isn't there a hearing next week?
Is there a hearing next week, Jeff?
Is there a hearing next week?
It would be on pharmaceutical DPA.
Right.
They're going to talk to some vaccine makers
Congress right now. I'm not familiar with the schedule of hearings.
Okay. Well, I think that there is one, Melissa, and to the viewers, I think it's next week or the week after. There is going to be a hearing where pharmaceutical manufacturers who are making the COVID-19 vaccine will talk to Congress, and they'll address issues like the Defense Production Act and whether or not, how that works. Of course, the United States imports a lot of pharmaceuticals, mostly from Germany, Ireland, Switzerland, and then India, I think, is probably in fourth place. Why that is, it depends, because everything is not broken down into what's being imported. A lot of it is just the ingredients that go into manufacturing drugs here in the United States that are sold specifically here in the United States, as opposed to full items like aspirin or something, or a a blood thinning drug. It might be an ingredient that's used to make that here in the United States. So it's very complicated to know. But of course, other than semiconductors and automobiles, drugs is the number one thing that contributes to our trade deficit here in the United States.
Gotcha. We're wrapping up about 2:20 right now. I know we're probably going to go ahead and take this conversation offline. I would suggest that if anybody is interested, send us an email, melissa@prosperousamerica.org. We'll go ahead and make sure that we get those questions right to Jeff and Ken if need be. You can also go ahead and check out the report on our website at prosperousamerica.org. And we'll have more updates on the U.S. economic trends and the GDP and the trade as time goes on. I know, Jeff, you've got a reshoring index coming out for Q3 in the next couple of weeks as well, too, correct?
Absolutely. That should be out late next week, I think.
Wonderful. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you, Melissa. Take care.
Thanks, Melissa. Bye, Jeff.